Hi, this is Bob Scully, and welcome to another edition of the World Show, Entrepreneurs, the Dobson series. Do you work in a big building? A lot of us do, maybe most of us do. And do you find yourself freezing in the summer because they cool it too much? Or sweating in the winter because they heat it too much? That's no fun. You're suffering, but so is your company. They could be losing hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of bucks. Well, our guest this week has an answer for that. As a young engineer, unemployed because he was just fresh out of school, he suddenly had an idea, and he never looked back. Here is André Rochette. André Rochette, entrepreneurs often become entrepreneurs by accident or by default. You couldn't get a job. You were just a kid out of school. So let's talk about that. How did all this begin?
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of both. It's a bit of accidents and chance. I was out of school back in 1992, and the economy at that time in Canada was pretty bad. So I'd studied chemical engineering to become a process engineer and to improve the gas exhaust of plants and stuff like that. I knew I wanted to work in the environment. But there's just no job in that sector. So I decided to travel instead. In a couple of months, I had made money with the stock, some stocks I had bought when I was a student, and so I could afford a small trip. And I went abroad. When I came back, it was still bad. I was sending resumes to a bunch of companies, but couldn't get anything. So I decided that I would, with a hint from one of my friends, he says, "Why don't you go selling thermostats, electronic thermostats, to small industrial places so that they can reduce their energy consumption during weekends?" And you know what? I had nothing to lose. I decided to take on the challenge. Had a Christmas break, and then in January of '93, I decided to just hit the road and try to sell those thermostats. And eventually, I succeeded after a couple of weeks and got awarded a $200 contract for a hairdressing saloon that wanted to reduce his expense. So
yeah, like maybe Tammy Wynette type of Steel Magnolia type of place. and were you shy? Obviously not. You're just out of school, and a sales job is sometimes the toughest job to begin with. You weren't shy about cold calling?
No, and when I was a student, I used to work in a ski shop, and I learned the basics of doing sales when I was that age, maybe between 16 and 18 years old. And there was always those reps from different ski companies that would come in and teach us how to listen to the client needs and how to respond to that and offer them often the father of 4 kids, what kind of experience he needs. So you listen to him and you say, this is the skis that you need. And I liked that job back then. And even when I was trying to find a job, I was always saying to my parents, I kind of enjoy doing that, meeting people, trying to find a job. And I said, when I get that job to finally, clean the whatever process of a plant, then that'll be boring. So meeting people has always been something that I enjoyed a lot. And
to go from the $200 thermostat to Ecosystem, which is a major company with 130 employees, that took some doing. When did it dawn on you that this could be a business, not just a job?
It took a couple of years. I was happy by the end of the first year, and that's a good thing about just going out meeting people. Is I met through the Yellow Pages, believe it or not, I met my current partner, Richard. One of my clients had asked me to do some drawings to get a building permit from the city. And so I went to the Yellow Pages, consulting engineers, found that very small firm. And so Richard was by nature he was curious, and he was asking me what I was doing, and then he was looking at all those studies for thermostats that I was doing, and he says, "Andre, there's much more to energy efficiency than just the thermostats or the lights that you're trying to improve." And he came to me on one particular client. He came to me with a $30,000 project, and I thought that was just amazing. And it's basically when I realized that there was that potential in existing buildings to improve energy efficiency by so much. So from that client and a couple of other opportunities that followed, I realized that was probably 95, that there was that early 95, that there was a serious business potential. And before that, I had also been able to see that there was a real market. There were other companies that were doing not exactly the same thing, but a lot of performance contracting to improve existing buildings by providing a guarantee on savings.
And we're approaching the point where it takes off, but I want to go back to the Yellow Pages. Did you throw a dart? I mean, that's incredible, the Yellow Pages. You weren't scared that you'd hit some fly-by-night guy or what? Did you throw a dart? Out of all the Yellow Page listings, why did you pick him?
It was even more simple than that. The first name, so I was not obviously looking for the big flag corporation, but just the one-liner kind of guy who can't afford an ad in the Yellow Pages. I thought, he's going to be cheaper. And the first one was a firm called Baudouin Tremblay. Obviously, B is, the first one. So, and so I called him. And he happened to be the Tremblay of the firm.
The
and,
T.
The T of, yeah. So, yeah. It was
and he's still your partner today?
He is. Yeah.
That's incredible, too. That's so you
hit
it off.
He left his firm probably a year after we met, and we became partner.
And so therefore he was the one who gave you that insight that there's much more to it. And at some point you hit on this idea, well, maybe you didn't invent it, but the idea of a guaranteed result is central to what you do. Let's talk about that. When you go to a company with possibilities of savings, you guarantee them.
Yeah. And that's, I would say, something that's very typical of ecosystem is we listen a lot to what our clients say. And there was, even though I didn't realize back then, because I was, still that university kind of kid out there, but a lot of people were telling us, we've had engineers look at the building. We've got this report from Hydro-Quebec. We've got, so much information. And, they all point to, yes, there are some possibilities, but we don't have the resources to do that. And so early on, I realized that there was a potential for, come in with a value-add service, which would be, we'll implement those solutions for you, and we'll guarantee the performance. And then I realized, as I said before, that this market already existed. It was called the ESCO market, Energy Service Companies. And so there's a bunch of them out there. But the approach we took is, let's take that guaranteed approach and let's go beyond that. Let's match with that approach innovation and also a commitment, a strong commitment to meet the client's needs and to go beyond their expectations. And that's been really the foundation of the company, is that culture of innovation, of engagement, and of going beyond expectations to meet the client's satisfaction.
So what was missing for those companies was certainty of result and quantification of result. They wanted to do it. Everybody thought it was a good thing. It was like painting the building. Nice, but not really anything material. You would come in and say, you'll get X thousands of bucks savings guaranteed, or we pay for it, or what? What was the pitch?
I guess the difference was the willingness to take on risk, because there's a lot of risk related to those projects. And I think I was still young enough that I didn't realize it. And if I was, who I am today, maybe I would have been scared of that business model, because, you say to a client, I will design a project for you, I'll build it, I'll make sure it operates correctly, that the people in the building are happy with the conditions and everything will be perfect. And on top of that, I'll guarantee the cost of the project and the savings that are generated by the project. Obviously, the savings are maybe affected by outside temperature conditions and also by the nature of the operation of the building. So it was a huge risk. So I think it was a bit of a luck that I was so naive back then, because I was young. And Richard was like that crazy guy who's always got those great ideas. And his motto is nothing is impossible. And he strongly believes that, and he's not afraid of just going out the box and trying stuff. Obviously, he's not 100% right. Like there's always that
percentage of
or that particular case where he will fail. But I would say on average, 9 times out of 10, he tries that stuff and it succeeds. And that's something that's very special about Richard is that ability to innovate and to go beyond the existing concepts in a business, the construction business and the electromechanical business, or everything that relates to the conditions inside a building, in a business that's very conservative. So that has allowed that ability to take on risk where a lot of people were not willing to. That's allowed us to succeed.
And where does your risk begin? When you say to the company, we'll build it for you, is it out of your pocket first?
Yeah, we have two kind of business models that we use. We can either design, build, finance, and then guarantee the performance, which is we come in with the solutions and the money, and we implement the improvements to the building, and the client will pay us based on actual savings on a monthly basis.
For a number of years?
For a number of years. So typically it'd be like 10 years.
You have all the risk there.
So we have all the risk, yeah. The other model is guaranteed, so they call that performance contract. The other mode is guaranteed savings, where the client will provide the funds. So we design, we build, and we guarantee the savings, but everything is paid for by the client. And if ever there's a shortfall on savings, then we have to give back the money. So at the end of the day, the risk is the same, but the perceived risk is different because the client doesn't have to take his money out of his pocket in the first model.
Now, when you, in the first model, are financing, do you have a bank behind you, or is it your own funds?
Yeah, no, well, it's a mix of both,
so
obviously.
So the bank, too, is taking on risk,
yeah.
And it doesn't seem like a banker's kind of risk to me. What do they ask you for before they lend you the money?
Well, the first one, they've asked for Richard's house. But today, they have enough, there's enough equity in the business to kind of cover that risk. So obviously a bank is a bank, and they don't risk too much. And the other thing is the market as it is today, most of our clients will finance the projects themselves because a lot of that is institutional, and they can get money at a far better rate than we can. So if they can finance a project at 1%, it makes a huge difference.
And you, I guess also your reward would be greater in the first model since you take all the risk. You'd be charging them a bit more out of the savings.
Yeah.
And how about the incompetence, the guys that don't turn off the lights, and the guy that turns up the air conditioning because he loves it like a polar bear and so forth? They can ruin your calculations. Incompetent people or just lazy people can ruin it.
Yeah, so you're right, but I guess this is our challenge. This is our challenge to make sure that we implement solutions that won't be affected by the way people operate. And if the solutions can't meet that challenge, then it's probably better off not to guarantee savings. So if the only energy saving measures that you're proposing is to tell the people to just close the windows and turn off the lights, it might not be a success. If you change the lights, from incandescent, poor performance light to LED, the new technology that's available today, well, you know what? You'll save 80% of the wattage anyways. So they might go from 3,000 hours per year to maybe 10% more, but the change on efficiency of the equipment itself is so dramatic that it doesn't make that much of a difference. And so the client and ecosystem, they both have to assume that the calculations will not be perfect, but that the estimate we'll get at the end of the year is a pretty good estimate that's good enough for a guaranteed savings scheme.
Just so people get a sense of this, because I know we discussed it before the interview, we're talking big bucks. You can take a skyscraper and apply this, and the savings are not a couple of $1,000. It's $100,000 or $1 million. Yeah. What would a big contract and a big saving amount to in dollar terms?
I would say that the average saving in a building is 25%. We see anywhere from 20 to 40. The average being 25. And in a big commercial building, in a big hospital or a university, that typically will be millions of dollars. So it can be anywhere from $1 to $5 million of annual savings, which is a lot of money. And the leverage this gives to the building owner or the institution is very powerful. First, it's a lot of job creation. Second, from the environment perspective, this is very good to reduce emissions by 25%. Can you imagine if we could do that in every building? And frankly, there's not too many buildings that we see where there's not that potential. So second, from the environmental perspective, it's very good. And the third one is you actually improve the conditions inside the building, and you also improve the quality of the equipment and the ease of operation of the building. So it's a major investment to kind of an asset renewal in a building. So we see it as a win-win-win, and it's a good business case. We sometimes wonder why there's not so many people waiting for those
That was
projects.
my next question, because it looks so obvious. And it's doable. The technology was there. You didn't invent the technology. It's just common sense and better technology. And you tell me that you have far more business than you can possibly take care of. How come?
It's a factor that's been studied at by this industry forever. And a lot of people say, if you were to sell corporate bonds at 18% guaranteed, there'd be a line, from here to Cincinnati to buy those bonds. So. I think a lot of people simply don't believe those savings because there's been in this industry some bad projects in the past, and that has affected the entire credibility of this industry. So it's very unfortunate because there's a lot of good projects out there that could create jobs, help improve the economy and help the environment and help the buildings themselves. And ultimately, if we can reduce the energy consumption of transportation, buildings, and plants by anywhere, in the 25% range, ultimately it's the entire dependency on oil that's at stake,
sure.
And that would be very beneficial to the society.
And when you say a couple of bad apples, a couple of bad projects ruin the reputation, what happened in those projects? They didn't do the savings, or they caused worse problems?
Yeah, typically they wouldn't do the savings. The company will try to justify that the savings are there, ends up in court, and as any bad business case, but very often we remember those bad cases more
sure.
than the good ones.
And who audits for the saving? I mean, because you have an interest in showing that the saving is there, you're paid on it.
Yep.
The other side might enjoy the saving, but they'd like to keep most of it. So who does the auditing to determine that?
So that's an interesting question, because we've been in business for 20 years and we've never had an argument in court about savings. And it needs to be good collaboration between the two. So obviously the company has all incentive to maximize the savings in the reporting that it makes of it. And the client doesn't want to see so many savings or so much savings because he knows he's going to have to pay for that. So we typically do a reconciliation report at the end of every year showing the savings. If the client has anything against the report, he'll tell us. And sometimes I'd say it might be 10% of. So most of the time we agree because it's all calculations. At the end of the day, it used to be $2 million per year of electricity and natural gas, and today it's 1.5. So you know what? The difference is fairly easy to.
Well, now that you mention that, I'm just wondering though, what about a rate hike? You discount for that?
We discount for that. Yeah,
we're not
responsible for rating, so we can't guarantee that the rate increase or decrease. And but there's always that 10% of potential litigation. And what we typically do is the client will hire a consultant, a consultant engineer or energy specialist, and they'll come in and they'll say, well, guys, you know what? The truth is just that in between at that level, and we just agree to that new number and we move on.
So you sort of knock your price down a bit. To buy the piece in a way.
If we can justify it, yeah.
And I've reading a little bit of research on this. Another problem that may have harmed the industry was the vertical integration of some of the people doing this were salespeople or are salespeople of a particular brand of air conditioner or heater. And of course, their whole goal is to sell furnaces and air conditioning. Is the industry moving away from that?
Not really. There's been 3 players in this industry. The first player, I guess, is people like us that are totally independent. They're not in that business to sell energy or to sell gizmos. They're just there to do good projects and to give the client, what he's looking for, which is a better building at a lower cost. operating cost. Now, the second group of companies is manufacturers or people that manufacture different type of equipment. It can be chillers, boilers, controls, and these companies obviously they typically operate an ESCO that is fairly independent from their equipment business, but obviously the ultimate goal will be to sell their either equipment or maintenance or operation services to the client. And the third group that is also in this business is ESCOs that have been related to utilities. So there's a lot of energy companies out there that have used these scheme to try to keep their existing customers. And say,
through efficiency, that doesn't give them any sales, though.
No, but they hope it's going to give them clients that will remain with them. In a competitive world, since the energy markets have been deregulated, a lot of utilities have been wary to losing their customers. So they said, if we help you, so obviously they're gonna give you some advices on reducing your energy bill. Mind you, they might not go that far, or they certainly will not tell you to change the fuel source if it's detrimental to their business.
And if you, to put it in graphic terms, since there's a lot of business out there, in a way you kind of have your pick. I guess you must pick the biggest. You must say, okay, what's the biggest hospital in this city? I read somewhere you were doing 18 hospitals at once in Ontario. Hospitals are obviously big energy consumers and maybe wasters. How do you pick, since you have, it seems to be really a supplier's market, how do you pick the projects?
A lot of it is based on the potential. So for a building, there has to be that potential of reducing the energy bill dramatically. So if there's not a potential to reduce it by more than 20%, we're not interested. Because if you're guaranteeing the savings and you're only saving 2%, it's going to be very tough at the end of the year to justify your 2%. If you're saving 25%, you'll see it. You can go to the CFO very confident that he sees the actual savings. So that's the first criteria. And the second criteria is, I would say it's mostly the values. So we have very strong values inside of ecosystem of innovation, and I've said that before. We work as a team. There's a strong team spirit, and we collaborate a lot with the client based on that value. And it's very important because we know energy, we know mechanical systems, we don't know their building. So there has to be that collaborative sense from the beginning working with the client. Otherwise, the project can be a real failure. If there's not a strong collaboration between client and supplier, it is very difficult. And innovation. I've mentioned that if the client is not willing to go beyond their existing state of operation or type of systems they have, we're not in that business for just installing new controls. Like the thermostats, we've done that back in '93, but today we want to bring new solutions. We want to change the way they think and operate their building, and that's how we can generate a high amount of savings.
And obviously you're very, very good at what you do, but also at the sales part. And as you say, you enjoy it. It's kind of a natural thing with you, so you don't need advice. But I'm going to ask you a question in the form of advice. Why don't you go for some trophy properties? Why don't you walk into the Pentagon or the White House or Congress or the Empire State Building and say, hey guys, there's millions of bucks going to waste here, and then you could put that in your literature. I mean, have you thought of it, a trophy property?
Yeah, well, our competitors have certainly thought of it. So we've seen some of our competitors working with these well-known either governmental institutions or private buildings. But you know what? At the end of the day, there's so much potential that. Obviously, if you have a contract with the Pentagon, it's a nice showing on your website. But right now, we're trying to cope with the growth and with all the potential in the market that we don't. It would be very nice to have, but it's not that we need that desperately to get our name on the street. We can, we're kind of coping right now with a 20%. Year to year increase in revenues, and so you have in a business that's very based on the quality of the people you have, trying to have a growth that would be over 30% would just be probably a slow slow path to debt. So,
a huge client might destabilize you, actually, might have the opposite effect.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're trying to be very careful. Growth is very important, but we want to have a very well-organized growth, and we want to stay alive. So we have to deliver quality at every project we do. And if the phone would start ringing tomorrow like crazy, then we're worried that the quality, it would be detrimental to the quality of the projects. Well,
Rochette, again, I'm going to end with some advice. Leave the Pentagon alone, because that's pretty big. You might never find your way out. But take a look at the White House. Try and take the guided tour and take a look at the walls. I'm sure you'll have some ideas.
Certainly worth it.
So thank you so much and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
André Rochette was our guest this week on Entrepreneurs, the Dobson series of the World Show. And that's our program for this week. I'm Bob Scully. Thanks.